So I would draw your attention to section 4.4 in the report, which provides an overview of those 11 risks and their status. So 8 of those risks are considered to be high risk, 3 are considered to be medium risk, and if you look in the column that's got the changes compared to the previous position, that actually represents a positive change in 2 risks in particular. So risk number 2 in relation to governance arrangements and risk number 5 in relation to the directions. So the reason for that is there's been quite a bit of work ongoing at the moment to strengthen and improve the governance arrangements, albeit it might be a bit slow. That work is in place and it has started again. And in terms of the directions, a directions policy has been developed and that will be presented to the IGIB in March. So pending approval of that particular policy, there will be new arrangements in place from the 1st of April for directions, again, which will strengthen the position there. The risk register itself will be going back to the senior leadership team meeting in March for a full review. And as part of that, we'll be looking at the format as well, whether we can actually streamline that and try and get that down to a more concise document, maybe a kind of 2-page that gives a really high level summary and overview of the risks. And then there would be separate reports around the monitoring of the actions and so on, just to give it a bit more focus. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Gillian. Yeah, lots of highs there, but good to see a couple reducing, given the position we've been in. Are there any questions or comments members have? Alison?
Yeah, just a few. I just wondered about staffing, you know, after COVID, and you know, how will things go with recruitment and retention? Is there think there's going to be an issue with that? And partnerships, how resilient are the partnerships going to be? I'm thinking about the third sector in particular because of the difficulties they've experienced in the last year. Anything. Just under the GPs, for most people, it's been really difficult to get in touch with a GP, and obviously they're having to work really differently just now. But going forward, it's going to be how easy is it going to be to get back to some type of normality? And I know that GP practices are having to work in different ways, but the public perception, we're getting a GP appointment, etc. It's really difficult, and people are really getting fed up. So, you know, they were just the comments I wanted to make.
Okay, Patricia.
Just, Chair, if you'd like me to respond to Alison's comments.
Please.
Thank you. So in relation to staffing, we've been doing obviously constant monitoring and risk assessment on our staffing levels to maintain safe staffing levels across health and social care. During COVID, and particularly redeploying staff, for example, into the community hospitals, into the mental health units when there have been outbreaks in those parts of the service. In relation to our biggest staffing resource, that's our care at home service and our residential homes that are run by the partnership on behalf of the council. We've done quite a considerable piece of work on care at home, and there'll be a paper coming to the IGB on the 9th of March. In relation to third sector and others, we are looking to do a further piece of self-assessment as part of the council's best value review, and Falkirk Council is expecting to have a best value audit completed in the next 3 to 6 months. And as part of that, we're looking at our self-evaluation and self-assessment, but I'll bring more to the board on that to do a wider self-assessment and reflection on COVID, and also you know, an improvement plan and what we need to do going forward. So hopefully that will help. In relation to GPs, I think we need to better understand locally and nationally what that is about. Some of that may be that people do not consider when they've been offered an appointment with a physiotherapist or a community psychiatric nurse, for example, based on their triage questions, that they may consider they're not seeing a GP, but they may actually be accessing the most appropriate service based on their reason for calling the GP practice. So I think we need to do a bit of understanding of that and understanding those perceptions and really where there may be some areas for improvement in terms of whether it's communications or actual direct access. So I think it's something that's not just a local problem or local issue. It is something that is coming up nationally, but you know, speaking to GP colleagues, their perception is different in terms of the volume and rate of work that they've continued to do through COVID, but also the alternative options that they've been able to offer people when they've called for a service. So I think it is something we need to better understand. Thanks.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, there's a kind of cultural change needed as well as the systemic change. Really, I mean, it was always a risk in relation to that piece of work that many people would perceive seeing a nurse, for example, as a lesser service than seeing the doctor, because that's what they've always been used to, even in occasions where it actually is more appropriate and would give them a better, a more specialist service. But it will take time to change that culture, I think. Alison, did that answer the point you raised?
Yeah, but I was going to say, I think COVID's created a much bigger distance, you know, obviously because of the social distancing and the different ways people have had to practice, but it's created a big gap and a barrier, and I think that's going to be hard to get around as well. But with the best value audit, would we be able to get an accurate understanding of how things are? Because obviously services aren't back up and running yet, and they haven't been running for a year, so we're no going, like, things haven't been running the way they normally do.
Okay, Sarah, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Not particularly on that point that Alison has just made, but I wanted to let Alison and committee know that in addition to the overview that Patricia's given around staffing, that I, as Chief Social Work Officer, have commissioned a short life working group to look specifically at social work staffing, recruitment and retention. And Councillor Black is absolutely right. We've seen a huge change over the course of the last year in relation to how people want to work, and some of the issues that we've been facing over the last year are very new to Falkirk. We've certainly had a lot more movement experienced across the qualified social work spectrum, so we need to understand what those issues are, and we need to make sure that we've got a good strategy, workforce strategy in place going forward. So we've identified a need there, and there is a piece of work that will be done right across social work. So it'll be social work, adult services, children's and justice, and it will be primarily led by the workforce development manager and supported by HR and various other individuals. So we'll be able to report back on that as well and take actions forward that are appropriate to make sure that we've got sufficient staffing across our qualified social work teams.
Okay, thank you. Patricia, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, it was just to add on the back of what Sarah has said, that the government are looking for integrated workforce plans to be submitted by March, and a more detailed plan for future years. So we're working on that, and we actually have a session on that this afternoon with our staff and colleagues across the system to look at that, the development of that plan. It's the second of a series of workshops on that. So we will be taking account of the impact that COVID has had across our various staffing groups, but also cumulatively for the partnership. So just to give you that assurance, and that will come to the IGB. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so we know there are perhaps increased issues around staffing then, but there are various pieces of work in train to look at that. So perhaps when SLT has a look at the risk register again, you can have a think about whether that has any material impact in terms of risk. Maybe it's just a case of noting some of the updated pieces of work that are there to mitigate that risk. Were there any other questions or comments on the risk register? Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to the internal audit progress report? Isabel, is that yourself?
Yes, it is. Thank you. So this paper provides an update in progress completing the 2021 internal audit plan. As you can see from paragraph 2.1, you're asked to note progress to date in completing the 2021 internal audit plan and to agree to defer the directions audit to 21-22. Paragraph 3.3 summarises the position. The first audit, which is directions, it would be scheduled for Q2 or 3 of 21-22, pending your approval. The second audit is risk management arrangements, and that has commenced in February 21. The terms of reference has now been agreed and meetings have been arranged. Finally, paragraph 4.1 notes that internal audit progress during 2021 was limited by the impact of COVID-19. However, the risk management audit has started and the directions audit will be completed as part of next year's plan. That's basically all of that. So happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Isabel. I mean, as Gillian's already reported, if there's a new policy coming in place, it kind of makes perfect sense for me to do the audit after that rather than before it. So
Yeah.
that makes sense. And of course, COVID has got in the way of everything this year. So again, that's just to be expected. Robert, you're on mute, I'm afraid.
You think I'd learn by now. Just for clarity in the paper under risk register, risk management arrangements, sorry, it says field work due to commence in February 2020. Is that 2020 or is it
21?
That was at 21. It was a typo.
Lovely, thanks.
Sorry.
Good eye, Robert. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I just had a question,
Great.
sorry. It was just about the coverage for 2021 and about if that has any implications for your overall assurance, so the overall assurance that you provide to this committee that then feeds into the annual governance statement. I just wondered if you felt that one review of risk management is enough.
Yeah, we did have that consideration, but what we're going to be able to do is look at the wider picture. I've actually put more in about it in the next paper because the annual assurance is dealt with in the next report. So do you mind if I give you a fuller answer there?
Okay, if there's nothing else, then let's move on to item 6 then, which is the internal audit plan for 21-22, Isabel.
Yes, thank you again. So this second paper is the audit plan for 21-22. You can see from paragraph 3.3 the two main reviews that we're looking to do. So yes, the first one relates to directions which has been carried forward. So that work will focus on the guidance that was issued in January and how that's being applied. You'll see there's some information there about what we'll look at. The second audit will review the impact of COVID-19 on existing business continuity and resilience arrangements, as well as the arrangements for recovery and reconfiguration. It will include a focus on the review and integration of health and social care partnership resilience planning frameworks. So again, two audits, and they'll be split over the council and NHS colleagues. The remainder of the report sets out some background on the audit process. It includes a continued commitment to bring regular progress reports to the committee over the course of the year. Paragraph 3.7 is the bit about the annual assurance report. So that provides an opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the control environment. So that report includes a summary of work undertaken and a comparison of work completed against work planned. This annual assurance report will be brought to committee in June. So back to Grace's point earlier, yes, there's potential that we're all obviously looking at one audit review for this year. But what we're going to be able to do is look as part of the wider opinion that we can consider outcomes of work undertaken as part of the council's internal audit plan and NHS Forth Valley FTF's annual report work. So That will basically be looking at the systems that have been used and that are relied upon by the partnership. So within the council, we can include various audits that we are doing. So things like to do, because the systems are the same. So that would be things like pensions, and so there'll be comfort that can be taken from that work. I hope that's a bit fuller for you.
Does that answer the point, Grace?
Sorry, I love this mute button. It's because I've got two screens, so I've got to move that. No, I think that's fine. It was just the obviously we rely on that, particularly when we're looking at the annual governance statement. And so, yeah, if we felt that there wasn't enough, then that would give us a bit of a problem. But no, happy with that.
Great. Yeah, governance arrangements have obviously been very different over the last year, so it makes sense that the review of them then is slightly different as well. Any other questions or points? Nope, I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, thanks, Isabel. That's great. We'll move on to item 7, which is the external audit plan. Grace?
Thank you. I was going to start with a little explanation about the timing, because we have prepared this annual audit report, but actually some of the guidance that supports our planning isn't yet finalised by Audit Scotland. We're expecting that to be soon, and they are then asking for us to finalise our annual audit plan by the end of April. So we've prepared our plan. We think it won't change, but it is just to note that if there's any guidance that comes out that impacts that, then we will let Gillian know, and we will send out a new version of the plan. As I say, I don't expect that to happen, but it's just in case. And I guess that kind of reflects the Audit Scotland view, which is that we had thought this would be a transitional year back to normal. I think we've stopped thinking that now. We still think this is a difficult year. So that's impacting the deadlines that they're going to set. We're hoping that won't affect the IJB at all. We're hoping we'll get back to normal timescales for doing the audit, and that we report in September as we normally would for the IJB. But it is just to be aware that that's going on. I was going to just kind of quickly touch on a few points from the plan. Page 4 is really just a summary of the plan, so I thought that I would just kind of pick up after that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the National Scrutiny Plan. So that scrutiny plan relies on a shared risk assessment that's prepared by the local area network of all the scrutiny bodies. So that's a meeting of all scrutiny bodies led by us as external auditors for Falkirk Council, but that would include the Care Inspectorate, Education Scotland, and the Scottish Housing Regulator as well. They're actually meeting, just started right now. They started meeting at 10 o'clock, so straight after this meeting I'll go and join that. So while the focus of that meeting is really on the council, then sometimes they do come up with areas of additional scrutiny for IJBs. There wasn't anything last year, but if there is anything for this year, then I will let Gillian and Patricia know later today if anything has come up. I don't expect it to, but that's one of those things that might change. In that section, we also talk about the political environment and the uncertainty that can create. And on page 6, we summarise some of Audit Scotland's recent messages about IJBs within their local government financial overview report, which was published in January, and we've included a link to that report in there as well. We've noted that those findings will inform some of our assessment on value for money for the IJB later on this year. On page 7, we refer to the independent review of adult social care, which may end up having a significant impact on the IJB. So I guess at this stage, we're just kind of highlighting that as an area for a watching brief in that space. In section 3, we get into our financial statement risks, and really there's only one risk, and it is in relation to the presumed risk of fraud that applies to every single body and in every single audit. We had no findings in relation to this risk last year, but it is just one of the areas that we'll do significant pieces of work on. We also set out our materiality level, so 1% of expenditure is actually at the lower end of the spectrum, but it doesn't have a huge impact on the level of work that we do for the IJB, so we felt that was appropriate to keep at that level. We set out our wider scope risk assessment on page 14. And as you'd expect, we continue to identify financial pressures as a significant risk, reflecting the budget gaps in the medium-term financial plan and the ongoing uncertainty about the costs and the funding for COVID. So I guess that's direct and indirect costs of COVID. We'll continue to review the effectiveness of financial management, but we haven't identified any specific risks in relation to this dimension after a good result last year by Gillian. And I thought I could refer to governance and to value for money together, because one of the areas of action that we have discussed with Gillian is a planned self-assessment against the best value guidance for IGBs. And this very much links into what Patricia was talking about earlier as well. We thought that one of the best things we could do this year is to just try and support that review of best value arrangements at the IGB. We think it'll set it up quite nicely for the Falkirk Council best value work. But also, we're expecting a new code of audit practice to come out later this year, which will, we think, put much more emphasis on best value within IJBs. So it's just that kind of groundwork and preparation for that to come in. I was going to just mention the Falkirk Council best value assurance report, which will be happening. So that is undertaken by us as external auditors of Falkirk Council and the Audit Scotland's own best value team. It does focus on the council, but quite often then there will be a look across to the IGB as well. The scoping meeting for that is actually happening later today as well. So we're going to have the LAN, and then we're going to meet with Audit Scotland to start kind of focusing in on where do we think that we want to look at for the best value review. They are talking about it being through a COVID lens and trying to be as focused as it possibly can be. So we'll see whether that scopes in or scopes out partnership working, and particularly the relationship with the IGB. So that is, again, another bit of a moving feast, but I will let Patricia and Gillian know as soon as I have any details to share. I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take any questions. I see Patricia's already got up her hand, but I will wait and see.
Okay, thanks, Grace. No, that makes sense. There are a fair few uncertainties there, and we know that Feely report potentially makes pretty vast changes to the governance of IJBs, should that go ahead. Patricia.
Thank you. I have one comment and one question. It was just to say, Grace, I've had discussions with Barry McLeod from the Improvement Service this week about the audit, and Gillian and I have just had a discussion with the chair and vice chair of the IGB, and that we're right behind doing that self-evaluation against the IGB, but also the specialist COVID questions as well. So we'll get that in tray. I'll bring something to the IGB meeting on that. The question that I had was in relation to the sort of health equivalent of the LAN network, the Sharing Intelligence for Health and Care Group Combined Intelligence, and just how, you know, we're obviously in the space that overlaps on both LAN and that group, and just where those things come together effectively in terms of that shared intelligence across the system.
It's actually one of the weaknesses in the layout of audit just now, because quite often then the auditor will be coterminous, so they will do NHS, so for example NHS Lothian, NHS Midlothian Council and the IJB. For Falkirk it doesn't work like that, so for Forth Valley then it is Audit Scotland who's the auditor. So we kind of recognised that as a problem last year, so we have set up calls with John Cornett, who is the Director at Audit Scotland, who leads that audit, just to make sure that we are kind of tapping into what's going on with NHS Forth Valley more closely. So we've set up quarterly calls for Stephen and John to meet to make sure that we know what's going on with NHS Forth Valley as well. It's not a perfect solution, but hopefully it just means that we have that awareness, because yeah, it feels like we can see everything that's happening on the council side, but much less oversight over what's happening in NHS Forth Valley.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. That is potentially tricky. Any other comments or points for Grace? Alison?
Yeah, I was just to say, I think it'll be really difficult to do a best value audit this year because of the circumstances. But the pace of change with integration, it just took off so quickly, you know. And I don't know how you can show that that's a permanent thing because of the way people had to work last March and April, you know. So it'll be an interesting audit. I look forward to seeing the results of it, the best value. But I don't think it'll be easy to do, because best value today under COVID terms is totally different from what we would normally expect.
I think you're right. Aberdeen City is currently, they're having their best value review just now, and so they're going to be the first ones who report, you know, in the kind of post-COVID world. So I guess that we're all kind of waiting to see that as well, and how easy it's been. I know that they've tried to very much focus down on you know, what action was taken during COVID, and so what was the impact of that, just to kind of tighten it up a bit. But I know that because it's so easy for everybody to meet, that certainly from an Aberdeen point of view, then they've wanted the auditors to meet the world, you know, everybody, because you just can just dial in. So I think it's been quite a slow process, but we will wait and see what that comes out with. We tend to see an early draft so we can share any lessons learned with the council and with Patricia as that happens.
Yes, it's quite useful not to be the first, then we can learn some lessons from Aberdeen. Okay, anything else, colleagues? No? Okay, thanks, Grace. That takes us then to item 8. Gillian, are you taking us through this one?
Yep. So this is the standing report, which summarises a number of national audit and inspection type reports that have been issued since the last meeting. I would draw your attention just to the table in section 4.1, which just summarises the national type reports. So the first two there from Audit Scotland, COVID-19 balancing the budget in councils and COVID-19 going concern in the public sector. These are actually guides for auditors, but I thought it would be interesting for members of the committee to see and to read them. In terms of that first one, so it's primarily around the legislative and policy requirements in terms of the need to achieve a balanced budget in this post-COVID world that we're in. The second one links specifically to the basis of the preparation of the financial statements in terms of that going concern assumption. Now, members will be aware that was a key focus as part of the audit last year, and I'm expecting it to be just as big a focus this year as well, if not more so. So that is a key area, and I'd encourage members to read through that particular guide in detail. The third report is around digital progress. Everyone will be aware there have been significant increases in the use of technology across health and social care landscape, but that obviously brings separate problems around digital exclusion, which we have obviously raised here, both locally and nationally, actually, in terms of that particular issue. The other reports relate to NHS Forth Valley's annual audit report. That was shared with us, and there was no particular issues in terms of the impact on the IJB. The next report was the Audit Scotland Overview Report of Local Government Finances, published every year. And there was obviously specific commentary around the IJB position. And again, it won't be a surprise to Audit Committee members to know there were key issues around financial sustainability for the IJBs, but they also referred to particularly high turnover in key leadership posts. That was specifically in relation to a number of changes in chief officer posts across Scotland. Next report on the list was our IJB report, which members will be familiar with. And the last report, probably most important for this particular committee, is the Feely report that we've already touched on. So that independent review of adult social care, which makes 53 recommendations, a number of which have significant implications for the governance and financial arrangements for IJBs. We have not obviously heard the Scottish Government's formal response to that report, so we await that with bated breath, but there are likely to be a number of changes which will have implications for our strategic risk register and how we operate and function as an IJB. The next section of the report specifically relates to a number of inspection reports in care homes. So you can see there was an unannounced visit there for Caledonian Court. The conclusion of the report that was the adequate care was provided through COVID for that particular care home, and that's obviously been presented to the Clinical and Care Governance Committee for further action as appropriate. That was just a very quick run through, so happy to take any questions in the report. Grace, see you've got your hand up first.
Mm-hmm. It was only just to say, I was actually wondering about whether to mention the going concern when I was introducing our plan. So you might remember last year that the reason why we had such a focus on going concern was because there was a new international standard of auditing on going concern, which meant that we had to place a lot more scrutiny on the going concern prepared by management, and that collided with COVID-19, which created a whole bunch of uncertainty. This year, the FRC have just published, it's called Practice Note 10, it won't impact your life, but it does impact ours because it changes, it kind of changes the focus of going concern for public sector bodies and makes it much more clear that if funding will continue and the services will continue, then you're a going concern. So it kind of draws that line in a much more simple way. And so we think we did the hard work last year in terms of just looking at those disclosures that are in the financial statements, but this year should be much more straightforward. Hopefully that's a little bit reassuring for you, Gillian.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I have to say I'm expecting this year end to be particularly complex and in some of the issues, but if the going concern one is now kind of resolved, then that's great.
Well, it makes perfect sense in terms of ongoing funding. I mean, we know that there will be funding next year. We might not know exactly what. In terms of Feely, we might not even know quite where it's coming from in the longer term, but we know there will be money. Okay, any other points or comments?
No, it was just from a personal perspective. I've went on about an Astral Care service for a while, and apologies because I'm not really that keen on a lot of the things that are in the Feely report. So sorry, Patricia. Hopefully, COSLA maybe managed to kind of thrash it out and get a happy compromise.
It's I mean, it's an interesting position. I mean, I think just about everything that Feely says about standards of care and human rights-based approach and everything else very much follows the direction of travel we've all been taking to greater or lesser extent. I think the controversy is very much around the funding and governance arrangements. And while government have said at high level they accept the recommendations in the report, quite how they will be implemented, I think, is an argument and a discussion that's still to come, presumably post-election rather than pre-election. So we pretty much need to have a watching brief on that for now, I would think. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, that concludes our agenda for this morning then. Is there any other business anyone wishes to raise? Nope. In that case, thank you all for your input. We meet again on the 16th of June. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.